Well, hi, how are you doing out there in internet land? My name is Brian Trippett. I am known as the Front Porch Conservative, and welcome once again to another session of Chattin on the Porch. We are a fun little live stream. We are, as one of my listeners, Robert Lowry, is fond of saying, the best place on the internet for hat speech. So, yes, welcome indeed. We are glad to have y'all here. I am sometimes known as the fine fella in the fedora. On occasion, I am called the common man with common sense. But in this moment, as always, I am your host. We are on Rumble, we are on Twitter, and we are on that quaint little alternative social media platform known as YouTube. So if you haven't done it yet, please tell your friends, get in here. We're about to have a very entertaining and lively discussion of all things economics. And boy, after watching what the markets did today, you kind of understand why we're having this conversation. So please tell your friends, share the link around, get them all in here. We're going to have a good time. I've got a fantastic guest who is returning as one of becoming regularly a regular contributor to the Electronic Front Porch, especially on the matters that we're going to be talking about tonight. So I'm really looking forward to this, and I hope you are too. Let's see who all is here. WWG1 is over on the Rumble side as always, bringing the jolly. TBA says, hello, fellow Porchies. My company has not left. Sadly, I will have to watch the rerun. Dang. I want to see Dr. Robin tonight. Now, wait a minute, TBA. Here's a golden opportunity. Why don't you just set them up around a computer or a TV and just, live stream it? We can introduce these people. They can become part of Fedora Nation. I just think there's an opportunity to be had here, unless of course they're lefties and they start throwing tomatoes and eggs at your TV set. We don't want that to happen, but I understand completely. Let's see who else here. Good night, Mister's in the house. How you doing, sir? Miss up in Connecticut. Thank you for advertising this fine evening as much as you can. Miss Tiny Tesla is here. Mwah. Hello, darling. It's going to be a good little crowd. We're glad to have you guys here. Let us begin, as is our wont, with just a couple of memes, which I think are very instructive for tonight's discussions. And with that, pain is one of those things in life that sometimes you feel by yourself, sometimes others feel it for you. But I think we can all agree on the following. When you're dead, you don't know that you're dead. The pain is felt by others. The same thing happens, of course, when you're stupid. I don't know who the fellow was that came up with this piece of profundity, but I absolutely wholeheartedly concur with this notion. Others feel the pain when you have passed on, but keep in mind, they can also feel the pain while you are alive. So just saying, think about it. All right, one more, and that sort of going to bring me to my guest. Everybody's talking about tariffs, and it's affecting everybody's life. I mean, what the heck are you going to do? Every time you turn around, something is being affected by a tariff. And it's gotten so bad, this poor guy, he's already complaining because, the wife's boyfriend can't afford the condoms anymore because of the tariffs. Oh, my Lord. I mean, this is horrible. Making for a terrible situation, matrimonially speaking. So, I don't know, man. Trump's got to do something about these tariffs. He's got to do something about these tariffs. Because when it gets down to this kind of situation, it ain't no good, man. It ain't no good. All right. With that, we're going to bring on our guest, and she has been a frequent contributor to the Electronic Front Porch, and she truly lives up to her reputation as an educator. She has been teaching economics now at Marshall University for any number of years. One of those situations she's so good at it, in fact, her students are on a waiting list to get into her classes. She teaches classes on microeconomics, economic theory, economic history, and the banking system. She has been on such shows as Quite Frankly and many other places in and around the internet and the interwebs, as the kids call it these days. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the Electronic Front Porch one of my absolutely favorite people, Dr. Robin McCutcheon. Doc!
Hi, thanks so much for having me back. I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it.
OG Wingnuts over on Rumble, and hat tip to Gypsy and all of her YouTubers, and you guys got a great Porch Nation there.
Yes, we do. I have said, though our audience may be small, I will argue that they are the finest uh, audience on the internet for their energy, their passion, their inquisitiveness, their ability to be informed on most any issue, and I'll take them up against anybody.
Yep.
So
They
lefties
are
there.
yes, they are a mass of formation to be dealt with.
Amen to that. Amen to that. WWG1 says, did she just call me a wingnut? I am honored.
Yep.
Yes, sir. I believe she did refer to you as a wingnut. So, coming from the doc, take that as a high badge of honor. Okay, I am glad to have you back, and probably should have had you on before now because the world's gone mad, and I need somebody to help straighten me out. Because I understand what some people are saying, I don't understand some people's reaction. I don't understand the reaction of some markets, and I for the sake of my own sanity, if nothing else, I got to get my arms wrapped around this. And I know my listeners are much the same way because friends of ours ask us about what the heck is going on. I thought Trump was going to bring, sunshine and rainbows. And now we're going through all this stuff. Right. I mean, for example, this is today's market. I mean, the Dow Jones drops another almost 1,000 points. You got the S&P down, NASDAQ's down, everybody's down. Gold, on the other hand, is just making a run for the hills, which we'll get to that momentarily. But people are looking at us going, hey, you told me to vote for Trump and now all our problems are going to be solved, but now we got all this going on. So that brings me to a whole list of questions, which some of them we've talked about, off air, because I was trying to give you an idea of what I want to talk about. So I want to start with something very basic. Tariffs. Donald Trump has made no secret of the fact he is more than willing to slap a tariff on some nation. And everybody around the world, and even in our own country, is just like, oh my God, he's going to bring tariffs. That's my best male Karen impersonation. And on it goes. But let's just start with something very basic. Let's say, just for the sake of an example, I am a manufacturer of widgets from the country of Liechtenstein. Okay. And I have secured a contract with someone here in the United States to bring in my widgets. Okay. And let's say that I am bringing in $1 million worth of widgets. Okay. However, for some reason or another, the President of the United States, one Donald J. Trump, has decided to slap a 25% tariff on Liechtenstein, my home country. So now here I am with $1 million worth of widgets. I've got a guy in the United States trying to get my widgets, but Lord have mercy, now I got this 25% tariff. Now, for the sake of just basic definition, would you please explain to my audience what is a tariff and what the heck is it doing to the buyer here in America, in my example, and me, the seller from Liechtenstein?
Okay. A tariff is basically a tax for importing whatever good is coming from Liechtenstein or wherever.
Okay.
And it's paid at the port where the good enters into the United States, which means that your buyer in the United States is going to be paying more for his widgets.
Okay.
Now, generally, if the buyer of the widgets in the United States is going to pass on that increase in price that he paid to his own customers, that would mean normally that the price goes up for the customer, us, the people who are buying the widgets. But the thing that most people forget is that inside of tariff theory, which has been talked about and discussed theoretically for hundreds of years, inside tariff theory, underneath of all of it, is the idea that every economy is small and usually the same size. Now, I'm just telling you how the theory.
No, that's fine.
So this theory was developed 200 and 300 years ago when most economies were very small. But over in England, even 200 or 300 years ago, that was one of the largest economies. And those English professors of economics, as we would call them now, went through some thought experiments. And through these thought experiments, what they sort of stumbled upon was that if an economy is large, very large, larger than all of the other economies with whom they're dealing, then that very large economy could use tariffs to make their own country richer. And so here's the thought process. The United States is the economy where everyone wants to send their goods because we buy everything. We are the largest economy in the world. Your widget seller from Liechtenstein ships his widgets over to the United States. The United States tax on a tariff, which is a tax. They tax on a tax. The United States buyer now has a problem. That domestic price now has gone up.
Right.
Which necessarily means, by the law of demand, that in the next ruffle of consequences, that widget seller is going to sell less widgets. In other words, the demand for widgets is going to fall. And that's going to push down the price. So while the widgets price domestically goes up, the demand for widgets is going to fall, bringing back down the market price.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So under this theory of tariffs, if you raise the tariffs too high, then what happens is you don't get to take advantage of the volume. In other words, the gains from trade, the terms of trade gain vanish. That's if the tariffs are too high. If the tariffs are too low, then you leave bargaining power on the table. Now, if the tariffs are just right, that Goldilocks amount of tariff, then you have an optimum tariff where that domestic price will rise, the demand will fall, pulling down the price. And then what that means is that the global price is going to start to fall too. Now, here's the other piece that a lot of people don't remember. If your Liechtenstein widget maker is sending most of his widgets to the United States, keeping very few widgets for himself in Liechtenstein, what is that widget maker in Liechtenstein going to do when demand in the United States for his widgets starts to fall? He's going to have a panic attack.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so as the domestic price begins to fall, because demand is declining, demand is reducing, and that pulls down the global price, now this widget maker from Liechtenstein is looking around going, I can't sell my tariffs, or I can't sell my widgets because the tariffs in the United States are pulling down the market price and pulling down the world price of widgets everywhere. Who else is he going to sell his widgets to? If we are the main buyer of his widgets, who else is he going to go to? So he has to find a way of lowering his own price to offset that tariff. Now, let me go back to the theory of tariffs, where every country is the same size. The thing that Donald Trump remembered, because he is well educated at Wharton, Donald Trump remembered that the large economy effect is going to make these tariffs work. Notice that what we're hearing about 70 or 80 countries come running over to the State Department saying, what can we do to lower our tariffs? They have lowered the tariffs for 70 to 80 countries down to 10% or less. Now, I'm I'm imagining in my head that all those countries are sending most of their stuff that they make over to the United States. And if that Goldilocks amount of tariff is just right, then it's not going to harm the foreign country as much. The domestic price is going to fall if they pass the tariff on to the consumer, right? They don't have to pass the tariff on to the consumer in the
That's
form
true.
of
That is
price
true.
and tax.
Right.
And so, but if they do and demand comes down, then the price of that, the market price of that good is going to come down as well. Most countries, my favorite example for talking about tariffs is Nicaragua. Nicaragua sends us 95% of the sugar that they produce. So they produce all the sugar and they send us 95% and they keep 5%. Nicaraguan sugar runs, well, the last time I looked at it was $6 a pound. A pound. I can buy a 4-pound bag of whoever makes sugar closest to me domestically for about $4. So Nicaragua's in a bit of a bind if they have a higher tariff on their sugar. Now they send 95% of their sugar crop to us, and when it arrives in the United States, it's about 1% of the entire amount of sugar that we produce domestically. So if you want Nicaraguan sugar, you go buy Nicaraguan sugar and you're going to pay $6, $7, $8 a pound. Or like most people, like me, I go around with a shopping list and I'm looking at Nicaraguan sugar for $6 a pound compared to 4 pounds for $4. And I'm like, I'm buying the $4 bag of sugar. And so these most countries that are sending us their goods are much smaller than we are. And they're sending a massive amount of goods. They're sending a huge amount of their the GDP that they produce, they're sending over to us. Now, let's take the example that I think it was Adam or Robert last time talked about. He tossed out an idea and he said, yeah, but what about Chinese steel? And you remember he looked up for me and he said, yeah, Chinese steel is 54% of our domestic production. So China sends us all this steel, and Trump has, let's just pretend for a minute that President Trump has tacked a 200% tariff. I don't know what it is, but let's pretend for a moment. He's tacked a 200% tariff on this Chinese steel.
Okay.
Don't you think we'd find steel other places pretty dang quick?
Agreed.
Right. So that 200% increase in tariff on the Chinese steel is going to work just exactly the way the optimum tariff theory said that it would, in that the domestic demand for that steel is going to drop off. It's going to fall, and that's going to pull down the domestic price. And that's actually going to lower the world price, because who else is China going to sell their steel to? If we're going to tack 200% on it, they're looking around to all these other countries saying, all right, who else will buy our steel? Mm-hmm. And so my suspicion is that China will be forced to eat it on the tariffs. Okay. They're going to be forced to find a way of lowering their own prices so that when they send the steel over and the 200% tariff is tacked onto it, that it's just the same price or pretty close to it as it was before all this tariff stuff started. Does that make sense? So the whole theory behind tariffs assumes that every country's economy is the same size, and that's just not true. And that was what Donald Trump remembered when he started off on this whole tariff deal. Okay. It is a way of improving the national welfare of your own country. That's what he remembered. And that's what I've talked with a lot of economists, and I don't understand why they don't understand this, except maybe they haven't read enough economic history. Because you have to go back several hundred years, and you have to start where these people way back 200 and 300 years ago were thinking about how do we set England in the right place to improve our lot in life compared to all these other countries in Western Europe?
Okay.
So did that make any sense?
It did. It did. And it's usually what happens. It's usually what happens. I've now got 3 other questions based off of the first question, but before I do, Mr. Zippy, with a comment, and then he's followed it up with a generous clink of the coin, as I like to call it. In my opinion, Trump is trying to figure out deeper issues to trade. Logistics moving forward is only going to hurt us more if we do not try and balance things. All right, and thank you, sir, for the super chat. Greatly appreciated. Here's one of my questions. You said that Trump is trying to find the sweet spot. I shouldn't just say Trump. Trump and his policy advisors, the Treasury Secretary Bessent. You got Commerce Secretary Lutnick. You got the trade negotiator. Yeah, all of them.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, Trump announced a big slew of tariffs, varying percentages on varying countries, but then whacked that back to 10% with like a 90 days. It's like, here's, you got 10% for the next 90 days. Come talk to us, boys.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just assume for the moment that the percentages he'd put out were gone through. When you're looking at all this, has he hit the Goldilocks spot with these countries, or is it kind of one of those, I'm going to have to try and adjust, trial and error until I think, yeah, right here, or do they have a good idea going in what they're doing with this?
First of all, I think to assume that Trump is stupid is a really stupid idea.
Okay.
What Trump knows about the United States is we have leverage. Now, most people have never read his book, The Art of the Deal. Everything that President Trump has done with regard to tariffs it's all from The Art of the Deal. He comes in with a whopper of an ask, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want 100% tariffs on all of these countries. I'm just making this up.
Sure.
He came out with great big poster boards, right? And there were 34% tariffs on Israel and 17% tariffs here and 50%. So let's say he comes in with a big stick and he says, I want all these tariffs, knowing he's not going to get it. He's not going to get it. What did he do 2 days later? He goes, well, look, let's just set everything at 10% for everybody. And you got 90 days to come see us. Otherwise, we'll put these other whopper of a tariff on you. 90 days.
Okay.
So he comes in with a whopper of an ask, and then he draws it back, knowing he's not going to get, he probably could force the issue, but that's not what he wants. All he wants is for the admission price into accessing the American economy to be just right for every country, which means not every country is going to have 10%. Some countries are going to have 0%. Some countries are going to have a higher percent. It depends on that foreign country's own State Department coming in and saying, okay, we want to make a deal with you. We don't want to pay 100% tariffs, but these are the things that we would like to import. And this is the price we think we can pay. And then they're going to negotiate. It's everything that President Trump does comes right out of his book, The Art of the Deal, because he knows that America has leverage. We are the country where everyone wants to send their stuff to sell because we buy everything from every country. And so he knows this. Those countries know it too. Where else are they going to sell all their stuff?
Very true. Now
they got no place else to go in a lot of cases. And so the leverage that Trump has is because we are the buyer that everyone wants to send their stuff to, that all President Trump really wants to do is to put that modest, optimal tariff on every country. And that's their entrance fee. That's their what do you call it when you're trying to get into a bar and you got to pay a $5 fee to get in?
Cover charge. The cover charge.
It's the cover charge to get into our economy. That's all that is. He doesn't really want people coming in for free. He wants them to appreciate the market that they're trying to sell their goods into. Because when you get something for free, you don't appreciate it. And that has been President Trump's gripe for 40 years. All these other countries, they don't appreciate us. We buy all their stuff and they don't appreciate us. They're always taking advantage of us. That's all he's doing. So the logic behind the 10% tariff baseline is what he really wants is reciprocal tariffs. We would like to sell our stuff to all these other countries too. If we sell a car into Germany, Germany puts a huge tariff on it.
Oh, yeah.
And in that way, our American cars are far more expensive than the German cars. Well, President Trump wants the German car and the American car to be priced just about the same, maybe a wee bit higher but so that people will buy the American car too. He really wants reciprocal tariffs. If Germany's going to put a 200% tariff on American cars, then fuck it. We'll put a 200% tariff on German cars and make them so damn expensive no American will look at it except someone who's rolling in dough. So what he's really doing with this leverage and these tariffs, this baseline tariffs, is he's trying to let these other countries, if you don't pay the cover charge, you ain't selling your stuff in our country. What we really would like to do is, if you're going to charge 10%, we will charge 10%. If you're going to charge 200%, we'll charge 200%. Makes no difference to us. We make our own cars here anyway, and they're better than yours.
Absolutely.
So that's the direction he's going, is reciprocal tariffs with every country.
Okay.
And not letting them get away with freebies.
Absolutely. Now, let me ask you a question. You mentioned something that I think a lot of policymakers, be they for or against Trump's economic ideas as it relates to tariffs and trade, that they ignore. And that is, and you're going to understand this term the second I say it, they don't understand rationality. And it's a very old concept in economics. I came across it when I was studying public choice theory back in the 90s during my undergraduate years. And it was when I was first introduced rationality, and stop me if this definition is not correct. Rationality basically says the consumer will go through a calculation before they make an economic decision, and they will use their self-interest, which is another concept of economics. They will use their self-interest and their rationality to maximize the most good with the least amount of means. Now, that's basic public choice theory. How much do you think policymakers ignore consumer economic rationality when they're either jumping up and down all over Trump, or they're like, go, baby, go? Or they're like, well, I really want to succeed, but I don't know if this is going to work. Because, how much is that concept ignored or just not understood? Because, in your example, Nicaraguan sugar is like $6, $6 or $8. You're sitting there as a rational consumer going, well, what the heck am I buying that kind of sugar for and paying that price? I go over here and get 4 pounds of sugar for $4. How much is it ignored or understood? Well, rationality.
So your definition of rationality was very good, but it ignores the other half. Okay. Economists assume that consumers are rational, that we use our logical, critical thinking, that we do things based on self-interest, not selfishness, but self-interest.
Agreed.
That our wallets have a limited budget. And that, we're going, I just said it, when I go to Kroger's, I've got a grocery list. I know exactly how much money that I can spend on my groceries, and I don't want to go a penny more than that. And so I'm looking for sales. I'm using my critical, logical thinking mind, because if we assume that people are not rational, that means that someone else has to do the thinking for them. If we assume that people are not critical thinkers, then someone else has to do the thinking for them. And from my observation, most policymakers think that their constituents are stupid and that someone needs to do the thinking for their constituents. They do not make the assumption like economists do. Our fundamental assumption is that people are rational.
Yep.
That's one of the 3 laws. People are rational. People respond to incentives. People are rational, and people make optimal decisions at the margin. Meaning, I know I've got a grocery list. I'm not going to go over it. Meaning, I'm going to make the best decision for me, what's in my best interest, based on what's in my wallet and what I know is coming in the future as far as a paycheck goes. I am rational. I don't need Congress to do my thinking for me. They can kiss my ass most of the time because they have no rationality themselves. They're not taking into account that I'm rational or any of their other constituents are rational. And they write up these asshole bills that screw everyone.
True.
So President Trump, knowing that people are rational, are going to look at the imported German car that's now 200% higher than an American car, and Americans are going to buy an American car, unless, of course, they're rolling in the dough, and that 200% increase on the German car makes no never mind to them. They'll buy the German car, but most Americans are going to buy the American car. So President Trump knows that people are rational all over the world. He based his entire business on people being rational. The art of the deal underneath everything is people are rational. When you have leverage, you roll it out there. This is what I want.
Yep.
We do it in real estate all the time. The asking price for a house is not necessarily what is the agreed upon market price of a house, right? A seller of a house will go get a real estate agent and they'll do some comps around the neighborhood and they'll say, okay, your house market price is $350,000. So we're going to ask $400,000. Knowing that we might get the $350,000, maybe we'll get $325,000, but it'll be pretty close. But if we ask $350,000, maybe we'll only get $280,000. Right? And you're in the mortgage business. People do the same thing with mortgage interest rates.
That's right.
JP Morgan Chase is offering, I'm just going to make this up, 30-year mortgages at 7%, and your mortgage place offers 30-year mortgages at, call it 6.75, because that 0.25% interest difference makes a huge difference over the course of 30 years.
Absolutely.
So that person who's looking for the $350,000 house is looking also for the smallest interest that they're to pay over the course of 30 years. So President Trump knows that we're all rational. People all over the world, it's not just Americans, humans are rational. You have to assume that, because if you don't assume that, it means you're irrational. It means you can't think logically. It means somebody else has got to do the thinking for you.
Very true. Very true indeed. Now, my audience has a couple of questions already, and one of them I'm going to save for a little bit later. Zippy, I saw that question. Don't worry, I haven't forgot it, but we'll get to it momentarily. Now, here's a question. It's not really a question as much as it's a statement, and this is going to lead into our discussions about China. The problem is everyone knows the U.S. does not produce anything anymore. Let me ask you this question. One of the principal arguments that Trump and his economic team are making with regard to these tariffs is it's going to force manufacturing to come back to the United States. Okay. For my part, I don't necessarily disagree with the argument, because economic rationality on the part of CEOs of companies and their boards of directors are going to force them to realize, buddy, it's cheaper for us to go put a plant in the United States and avoid the whole tariff issue altogether, and then we'll just export it out to somebody else. Because you see announcements about this company. Hyundai is putting a plant down in Louisiana. Toyota is ramping up production of various things they're doing here domestically in the U.S.
Putting in a plant. So a lot of these companies, if the majority of their consumers already live here in the United States. Like I've seen some companies where they have 70, 80, 90% of their consumers are here in the United States.
Right.
Build the plant here and then export that other little 10% out to some other country where, right? Again, rationalities. The CEOs are going to be very rational. But now let me ask you a question and kind of flip this for your viewer.
Okay.
I'm just going to put out a what if.
All right.
Because I don't have any evidence, but this is my gut tells me that President Trump is a sneaky bastard. He really is.
It's probably one of the nicest things ever said about the man, but go ahead.
What if President Trump has been working on these tariff deals behind closed doors since 2017?
Possible.
Okay. How is it that President Trump can say, we're going to have manufacturing coming out of our ears when you and I both know that it takes time to either refurbish old or rebuild from new?
Right.
What if he's already been working on these tariff deals since he first got in the first term?
Possible.
So these companies, because, sorry, a CEO does not make an instant decision. A CEO is looking 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. The decisions that they're making today won't come to fruition for another 5 years. That's how far down the line. So Hyundai, NVIDIA, at least 3 food packing companies from Canada, they're all moving here.
Mm-hmm.
What if they've already started construction? What if President Trump, when he was in office the first time, he was slashing regulations left, right, and center. What did he say? He said, we don't want it to take 10 years to build a factory. We want the factory built in 6 months or 2 years or less, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was going through and he was shredding the regulations so that companies could build their new buildings or get refurbished or put in roads even faster. What if he's been working on this since 2017?
That's possible.
So that when NVIDIA says, oh, we're just going to move our whole production over to the United States because that's where 80% of our market is. And Hyundai says, we're just going to move all our production to the United States. What if they've already been doing this?
Possible.
Now, like I said, I don't, this is my gut feeling, because President Trump does not do anything, at least the way I see how he operates. He doesn't do anything spur of the moment. He's been thinking about this, not from the moment he got into office in 2017. No, he's been thinking about this since 1984. How do we do this? How do I get this done? If I was president, who would I contact? Who would I need on my team? Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So he's in office for 4 years, from 2017 to 2021. And then he's got 4 years where he's working with people all over the world. So these CEOs, even if they had been in talks with him in 2019 or 2020, they're now looking down the road. We're in the 5th year where all the rules and regulations for building buildings, all of the permits, they've already been pulled. We do not get the proper type of news out of the mainstream media to tell us if this action has been being taken or not. We're not told. And my gut feeling tells me a lot of this action has already been done. The permits have been pulled. They don't have to start from 0. They're already at 75. And they've only got a little bit left to get to the 100 part. 100%.
Could very well be. Could
Right?
very well be.
Because
Yeah.
How else does President Trump promise the American people, look, it's not going to take very long and we're going to have manufacturing coming out of our ears? When if he started from 0 90 days ago, when he got inaugurated the second time, if he started from 0, it would be 3, 4, 5 years before anything happened. No, he's talking like it's going to happen imminently.
let me ask in that vein, let me play the devil's advocate for a moment. These trade deals that are being negotiated, how much pressure do you think Bessent, Lutnick, Rubio, Lighthizer not the trade rep anymore. I forget what the guy's name is, but how much pressure do you think these guys are under to get these deals done and publicly announced? Or is it one of those things where you think, okay, they've been working on this for a while, they're just trying to get it to the finish line?
I think not only have they been working on this for a while, but I don't think that I don't think the Americans are under the pressure. I think it's the foreign countries that are under the pressure.
Okay.
Right? Because those countries are trying to sell us the majority of what they make. If they don't sell it to us, who's going to buy it? They're in big, deep trouble. So it's not our people who are under pressure to get the deal done. It's their people who are under pressure from their governments to get the deal done. Because what happened the day after Trump announced these tariffs? Vietnam came running over saying, we're ready to make a deal.
True.
Argentina got a deal almost immediately. I mean, I in my mind, I'm imagining the State Departments of countries from all over the world sending, not just sending, but calling and saying, we're going to be in town. Can we meet with you? We're coming to meet with you. Here's the deal we would like to present. So there's your deal. We're going to come back with a counter offer. And even before they get here, the deal's done. The counter offer is either accepted or rejected, and they're doing the negotiations on the phone. They're just coming here to sign the papers. They're not coming here to make the deals. They're on the phone with each other, already making the deals. And do you remember from November 5th last year, President Trump said, oh yeah, I'm in talks with people all over the world.
Yeah, I remember.
I like I said, I have a feeling that President Trump has been working this trade deal since the moment he got into office back in 2017.
Altogether possible.
Because he's been talking about this since 1984.
Oh yeah, I remember the interviews with Oprah Winfrey, and everybody's seen the clips. You know, exactly. I mean, the thing that kind of shocks me about the mainstream media, which, you know, it takes a lot for me to be shocked by the media, but, you know, because at this point, what's left for them to do that they haven't already done? But what shocks me is just the whole lack of any sense of memory, because Trump's not introducing anything new here. He's been saying this stuff since the 80s. Yes. He's like, why in God's name are we being ripped off the way that we are? And and now 50 years later, people are like, oh, this is a radical new idea. No, it's not. The guy's been saying it for 45 years.
Yes, seriously? They have dementia. They have an extreme case of senility because they don't seem to remember anything that even happened last week. And look how fast the whole tariff war went rolling away. Mm-hmm. Have you heard anything about tariffs today? All I heard about was the Pope's death.
Yep. Absolutely.
Pete Hegseth death, I think, you know, there might be something going on with leakers producing false stories about Pete Hegseth. So, I mean, look, I think President Trump has been working on these tariff deals for a long time. And I think that when these countries come in to visit our State Department, they have already pre-negotiated everything that's going to be done. The foreign country's State Department representative representing their particular government, all they're there to do is sign the papers. It's already a done deal. And I can't believe that any of these countries were shocked and surprised. No. Okay. President Trump has been talking about this for too many years for any of these countries to be shocked.
Yep, absolutely. And with that, we're going to take our first real quick commercial break. My name is Brian Trippett on the Front Porch Conservative. I'm joined tonight in a session of Chatting on the Porch by economics professor Dr. Robin McCutcheon. All right, let's get to the 800-pound gorilla in the room where all this tariff is really, really rubber meeting the road, and that is China. Because there's everybody is, well, I shouldn't say everybody. Let me rephrase that. A significant number of the talking head economic aficionados are all absolutely terrified, no pun intended, terrified of Trump and what he's trying to do with China. And I mean, they almost snuck something past me, which, I'm not going to say I catch everything, but man, I woke up real early one morning and I'm flipping through Twitter and I was like, Trump just put a 245% tariff on China. I went, oh no, he did not. Then I went and looked at the fact sheet and I went, son of a gun, he did. Now, like we said a moment ago, most of the countries that Trump listed are now sitting on like a probationary period tariff of 10%. Mm-hmm. China, on the other hand, is under no such reprieve.
Right.
And the Chinese, I think, have got it ramped up now to like, I think it's 145%, something like that. In the last count I had, we're sitting on 250 if we really want to pull the trigger and do it.
Right.
All right, let me play I said in my emails I was going to play the devil's advocate with some of these questions. So let me start being the devil's advocate right now. Oh my God, Trump's got our biggest trading partner is China. He slapped a tariff on them. They're slapping tariffs on us. We're trying to get our way out of inflation, and this guy seems like he's trying to suck us right back into inflation, because if this thing drags on for a while, it's going to cost us, like let's say I'm a manufacturer here in the U.S. I got to import something from China to make my product. Okay, well now Trump's going to cost me an arm and a leg to try and produce it. I don't know if I can pass it on. I don't know if I can absorb it. I don't know if anything else. How much risk is there short and intermediate term of inflation taking a jump in this conflict we've got going with China right now economically?
Well, let's set aside the domestic production of the things that we consume on a daily basis, like food. Okay? Because not all of our food comes from China.
Okay.
I quibble with the idea that China is our biggest trading partner. We might be China's biggest trading partner. Right?
Okay.
But I'd always understood that Canada and Mexico were our biggest trading partners. That we freely traded across northern and southern borders much better or much faster than with China. But now think of this for a minute.
Okay.
The goods that we send over to China, if China is tacking 150% tariff on anything, on all of those goods going over to them, what portion of their domestically produced items of the same goods is our stuff going into their country? It's like the Nicaraguan sugar. If we're sending, let's pretend we're sending T-shirts over to China, is that, and let's say we're sending 95% of the T-shirts that we make to China. Once it gets to China, what part of their domestically produced T-shirts is our portion? Is it a huge piece or is it a small piece? Does that make sense?
It does.
So I know that the amount of goods that we send over to China is far fewer than the amount of goods that they send over to us. They depend on our economy to buy all their shit. They don't keep very much of their stuff in their economy for themselves. So this is a problem for China. Remember, if they're sending the majority of their stuff to us, and we've tacked on, let's call it 250% for everything. We've tacked on a 250% tariff for everything coming in. What happens to the domestic demand? Because now the price went up, the domestic demand is going to decline, which is going to pull down that price. The market price is going to fall. But it's not just going to pull down the market price here in the United States, it's going to pull down the market price worldwide. So now China's in a pickle because they've sent all their shit over to us and we're not buying it, or we're not buying as much, or we're only buying what we need and not more. And now what are they doing? They're sitting with their warehouses on Long Beach or Cape Canaveral, and they're sitting with warehouses full of stuff that they can't sell because we're not buying it.
Okay.
They're in a pickle. Now, your manufacturer that has to have that imported, whatever it is, they have a choice to make, right? Remember, we're assuming rationality. He might look around for somewhere else in the world to see if he can get a duplicate item, a substitution. Instead of going to China, maybe he goes to Vietnam. Right? Now, the week after or 3 days after all of these tariffs were imposed, one of the articles I read on Zero Hedge was that China had immediately sent representatives over to Vietnam to see if they could ship their stuff from China to Vietnam and then over to the United States.
To bypass the tariffs. Yeah.
Bypass the tariffs. So your manufacturer is looking over at Vietnam going, okay, China's going to send it to Vietnam and Vietnam's going to send it. So I'm cool. But again, China is in a pickle because they send most of their stuff to us, US. Who else are they going to send it to? Ukraine? Poland?
Yeah.
Germany? South Africa?
Yeah, good point.
Okay, so here's the other half that President Trump knows. China's entire economy depends on us. We're sitting there going, no, I ain't buying it. Oh my God, what's happening over in China? Well, the yuan is crashing.
And crashing very hard when last I looked.
Right. So now there's poor President Xi, who's looking around going, fuck, they're not buying our stuff. And now my currency is overvalued. It's crashing. Holy shit, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Donald, don't tell anybody I called you, but oh my God, you got to do something.
Yeah.
I'm going to be in big trouble here if you don't help me out.
As we say here in China, I in deep doo-doo. So
remember, America has the leverage, and President Trump knows this. He knows this. So he could yank the tariffs up to 500%. Oh my God, he'll kill China.
Yeah.
China will, their entire economy will implode because who's going to buy their shit if we're not buying it?
Exactly. That's very, very true.
The barrel that Trump has China over is big enough to spank them. And that's exactly what he's doing.
And that's a question that one of my listeners, Zippy, asks us. Can China afford this trade war? And your answer is quite emphatically, not just no, heck no. Hell no.
Hell no. Because see, China, poor China, they really got themselves into a pickle, right? When Nixon went over, do you remember when Nixon went over to China in the 70s? And then Clinton and Bush gave China, I think it was something like most favored nation status or something like, invited them into the World Trade Organization.
Yeah, most favored nation trading status. I remember this in the 90s.
China took a look at our economy and said, wow. And they started inviting manufacturers over to China. Do you remember that in the early 2000s? Yeah. I was teaching up at Wayne State in the summer of, it was like 2004. And I had a non-traditional student there whose husband made he owned a company. It was an auto supply company. And they made something for GM cars. And he had just gone over to China to check out the manufacturing capabilities of China. And he called up his wife and he said, guess what I found? They've already got a building for me. They will have all the machinery. All I have to tell them is what I want. They'll order it. They're bypassing all of their rules, all their regulations. We don't have to pay attention to anything EPA. It doesn't matter how much we pollute. We're going to be able to hire Chinese workers for $2.50 an hour. And this isn't like, I think this was like 2004 or 2005, $2.50 an hour. And it's not going to cost us that much to set up over in China. And so the next day she came into class, she told me all this. Well, UAW workers at the time, if you included a 30-year union worker, their wages, their benefits, their paid time off, everything, it was close to $200 an hour. 200.
Wow.
And so I did this in class because I had all this information from her. So I had all of my contrary American UAW information for the standard UAW worker. And I put all this up, and I let the students know this was information that one of their fellow students had given me, not mentioning her. And I turned around, and the entire class was like, oh my God. And I said, so why would nobody go over and build their stuff in China?
Exactly.
And when the class was over, the students got up and left, and she stayed behind. And I said, so when is your husband moving his business over to China? And she said, he just left this morning.
Oh.
And that's what we were up against, because China they were wooing our manufacturing with great big carrots. No EPA, no regulations, $2.50 an hour for the workers. And don't worry, we'll house the workers right here. They'll never leave the premises.
And in COVID, they didn't.
And well, don't you remember the company Foxconn? They have all their workers slave labor. People are throwing themselves off the building so much they had to put a net around the building to keep people from jumping off and ending their lives.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So all of that went on 20 years ago. Well, so China's got all of this manufacturing that they've wooed from the United States, and then they're going to ship it back to the United States. They were doing it on the cheap and on the down low for 20 years. So they've had 20 years of building all of this up. And now we won't buy their stuff. We tacked on a tariff so high that people are going, I don't know if I need it. I'm pretty sure I can get it from somewhere else.
Yep.
And so China is in deep doo-doo. They have laid themselves down on the guillotine and said, just go ahead and chop her head off.
Let me ask you a question. I mean, and I don't disagree with your argument at all, because sooner or later, economic rationality takes over for communists as much as it does for free marketeers.
They got to eat too.
Exactly. How long can this go before China cries uncle? I mean, and if there's no good answer to that question, I understand. But in your opinion, 6 months, a year, less than that? I mean,
China's got 1,300,000,000 people. Their standing army is about 300 million people.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 3 times more people not in their standing army. How long can the Chinese economy run in depression style subsistence?
Yep.
Before the people revolt. Now, they don't have a Second Amendment over there, but will the Chinese army stand by and watch their families starve to death? In other words, I'm asking, will the Chinese army obey to the point where they're watching their families and their villages starve to death? Or
that's a great question.
Or will they take their tanks into Tiananmen Square and point them at their parliament?
That's a very fair question.
So that's the place that Trump doesn't want it to get to. Trump wants Xi Jinping to cave before them, but Xi Jinping has another problem. His currency is crashing.
Yeah.
And he doesn't own enough treasury bonds to hurt us anymore.
Oh no, hold on a minute. Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Because you just brought up something I was going to get to, but since you walked
Right
the
into
conversation, yeah, since you walked the conversation to it, let's just go there. One of the principal arguments that I have
it.
heard from a lot of people, talking heads of varying stripes, oh my God, they're holding so much of our T-bills. They've bought so much of our debt. We can't possibly get into a tariff fight with the Chinese. They'll just crush us. They'll bury us with it. They'll sell it and jack everything up, and then all hell breaks loose economically. You're saying it's not going to happen. They're divesting. Go on with that.
They have already divested to the point where I think they have less than $1 trillion in treasury bills. Now, here's the thing about treasury bills. If you take a treasury bill out onto the market and you try and sell it and nobody buys it, your next step is to take it to the Federal Reserve, and they have to pay, or the U.S. Treasury, and they have to pay you in cash.
Mm-hmm.
They have to give you the cash. The more cash that goes out into circulation, so they give them U.S. dollars, right? U.S. Federal Reserve notes.
Yep.
The more they give them, the more worthless the note is. So they trade treasury bills that have nothing behind them for Federal Reserve notes that are just as worthless.
Okay.
I mean, and the more Federal Reserve notes that go out there, the more worthless the Federal Reserve note is. And if I was President Trump, now I don't know if you noticed this, but the next 4 years of budgets for the U.S. government takes us into the stratosphere close to 42 trillion, like at the end of 2028, fiscal year 28. It's like 42.1 trillion or something.
Yeah.
And so, but what has President Trump been telling us? Us, not Congress, because they're useless. President Trump has been telling us, I want sound money, which means I want a U.S. dollar that's backed by gold or silver. And I think I saw somewhere on one of his truths that he's headed off to Fort Knox to figure out if the gold is still there. And he's still got Judy Shelton, who's talking about a 50-year gold-backed government bond. And so imagine with me, President Trump is looking at this $42 trillion, and China's out there going, well, we've got these U.S. Treasury bonds, and nobody's buying them out on the market, but we can take them to the U.S. Treasury. Can you see suitcases full of these? And the U.S. Treasury will give us Federal Reserve notes. The dollar, the Federal Reserve note is going to be worth absolute toilet paper by the time President Trump gets done with this. So it doesn't matter if they're holding a U.S. Treasury bond, because they don't want to hold a U.S. Treasury bond. There's nothing behind it, but they could trade it for Federal Reserve notes, and those are even more worthless. Unless they want to trade the Federal Reserve note for gold.
True.
Now, China just announced another 1,000-ton gold deposit that they just found.
Just found.
Mm-hmm. Along with lithium and hydrogen and all of these rare earth minerals. What we're seeing over, and remember, if the yuan is crashing, Xi Jinping wants a gold-backed yuan too, because he's part of the BRICS system, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, that consortium. They have already, between themselves, and I think there's like 120 countries around the world now. We've only got 208, okay?
Okay.
So there's like 120 countries plus the 5 main guys, one of them being China, and they've all agreed to trade among themselves using their unit. It's almost like a crypto. It's not a crypto, but it's like a digital currency. And their digital currency is backed 60% by gold. Each country puts in 30% gold. And then the other 20% that they put in is whatever other asset, silver, wood, oil, whatever. So they've got a digital currency that's worth more than a Federal Reserve note because it's backed by gold.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure the President Xi Jinping is looking at getting rid of their central bank and just, off you go. We're not using this useless yuan. We're going to have a real gold-backed currency, a real gold-backed money as well. So maybe it doesn't matter to President Xi Jinping that his yuan is crashing. Maybe that's part of his plan to get rid of it. Okay, look, it's useless. Let's go back and use gold. That's exactly the direction President Trump is taking us to. He wants a true gold-backed currency, a true asset-backed money, a true sound money. And so, so what if China's got $14 trillion in U.S. bonds?
Let's see. I got one form of toilet paper backed up by another form of toilet paper. Both of them equally as crappy.
I could wallpaper with Federal Reserve notes, or I could wallpaper with Treasury bonds.
Okay, fair enough.
Equally as useful, in my opinion, knowing where they want to go at the end of the road.
Okay.
Does that make any sense? I mean, I'm highly entertained by all of this. This is like the best time to be an economist.
Oh, you economists are like a bunch of kids at a movie theater. You got popcorn and,
This is even better than 2008.
Yeah, we're all sitting over here going, yeah, I mean, one part of the population sitting over here going, mother of God, I don't want to look at my 401k statement. The economists are over here going, woo, pass the popcorn around. This is great.
Just me. All the rest of the economists want to hang themselves because they haven't figured any of this shit out yet.
Well,
so my point is that President Xi, I think this, again, it's just a gut feeling, having watched all these machinations going on. I think what President Xi is doing is a controlled implosion of his own economy to take it in a direction where they have sound money and they have the proper optimum level of tariffs, where they're doing their own manufacturing for their own consumer-based economy, because they can't be dragged by the neck by our consumers. And I think they're figuring this out. We cannot allow ourselves to depend on one country, us, or any country, to the point where if they decide not to buy our stuff, we're screwed.
True. And on the other hand, the Americans are figuring out, crap, they're manufacturing our pharmaceuticals, they're manufacturing this, this is nuts, bring it home.
Right.
And what should happen is, in theory, both countries' manufacturing bases will rise up to meet the demand that their respective consumer bases have.
Right, exactly. Okay. Which means that China's economy is going to get a lot smaller until their consumers, the Chinese people, become consumers of their own goods and services, like we were doing coming out of World War I and going through the Roaring 20s. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to end up good for everybody. But in the meantime, for people who, for my compatriot economists who have forgotten their history or never learned it in the first place, it's going to be a little bit of a rough ride. And in the meantime, oh my God, I'm having so much fun. I can't cry over this. This is the best time. Because we've never actually seen a country do what President Trump is doing with the leverage he has with the economy from the United States. I mean, maybe the closest we could get would be 1815 when Britain did that to the rest of Europe, but that was small potatoes compared to what we're doing right now. I mean, this truly, for an economist, there are going to be books written about what President Trump did and how he showed that all these Ivy League, ivory tower economists were just idiots because they forgot their theory or never learned it in the first place.
Yeah, I can just see around the faculty lounge at Marshall, one economist is sitting over there, pouring out his whiskey flask, like, okay, I think I can get through the day now. And the other guy's reaching for the, Pepto-Bismol and the Tums and the and the Alka-Seltzers. You're just sitting over there going, "Woo! Isn't it a great day, fellas? Isn't it a great day here?"
Oh, look at that gold price! Holy shit!
And
It
everybody's
really
going,
is going to go to 4,500.
and everybody's going, "McCutcheon, will you shut up over there?"
Shut up! My 401k is a 101k now, and I'm like, who the hell cares? It wasn't yours to begin with.
Well, our audience is getting quite the kick out of your enthusiasm. I will say that. Now,
this is really your audience. Your audience needs to take, 5 or 10 steps back and try and get the whole picture of what's going on, and then they'll enjoy this too. It won't be nearly as scary as what the mainstream media tries. So stop listening to the mainstream media. They don't know their ass from a hole in the wall, especially when it comes to economics, because their experts are like Robert Reich, who's a midget and doesn't know economics half as good as I do. Okay, fine. He's a Nobel laureate, but that's a bullshit prize anyway.
Well, or they're listening to Paul Krugman, recently retired from the New York Times, and I'm sitting there going, "Thank God Krugman's retired. The collective IQ of America went up 10 points with his retirement."
That's right.
So now right. I have to on behalf of one of my audience members, because there's a couple things we're going to get into, because I know the hour of the night, and we'll bring it into the train station here shortly. Ask her about the Fed. Thanks. I've got a Fed related question. Okay. And let me set this up. There are two things I am very sure that you hate in life with a passion bordering on the holy. One of them is an Ohio State football team in November. Yeah, exactly. I'm getting the reaction already. And the other is the Federal Reserve. Okay. I know for sure that those two things you would detest with every fiber of your being, which brings me to my question about the Fed. I have seen situations over the years where the chairman of the Federal Reserve and the president of the United States are at odds economically. I mean, it's not a given that they should be in lockstep, syncopatic with each other as far as their thoughts and ideas about the economy. Because in one sense, theoretically, they both have two different functions. One's worrying about fiscal policy and the other's worrying about monetary policy. So I get that. That said, I have never in my life seen the unspoken animosity that Jerome Powell has for Donald Trump. I mean, back before the election, Powell's talking about, a couple of Fed rate cuts to make sure that we keep the economy humming along, yada, yada, yada. Trump gets in and, nope, we're not going to cut the rates. What the hell are you talking about? I ain't cutting no rates. Nope, can't do that. Can't risk it. That's, wouldn't be prudent, not good for the economy. Jerome Powell is channeling his inner George Herbert Walker Bush. Not good for the economy. Wouldn't be a prudent move at this time. I'm going to put it bluntly, what the hell is going on between these two guys? What is this deal?
I think we first have to remember how we got the Federal Reserve. I mean, if your people will go read G. Edward Griffin's book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, which I think came out in maybe the early 2000s. Griffin is an excellent historian, and he tracked down a lot of the people or their writings that were involved in the formation, the secret meeting that happened on Jekyll Island in 1907, right around the Panic of 1907, and then again on 1911. And he tracked down a lot of people and or their writings to figure out how the Federal Reserve was thrust upon us in the dead of night on December 23rd, 1913. The Federal Reserve is a private corporation based out of Puerto Rico. The Federal Reserve is not a government agency. So Jerome Powell is not a government employee.
Okay.
And in fact, I think it was back in, I can't remember the month, but might have been August or October. It was before the election, I think, when Jerome Powell was doing one of these pressers, and one of the media schmucks asked him, "Well, what would you say?" I'm going to paraphrase. What would you say if President Trump wants you to resign. And Jerome Powell says, I'm not resigning. And the guy came back and said, well, what if he fires you? And Jerome Powell said, it's not permitted under the law. And the news reporter went, what? And Jerome Powell said, it is not permitted under the law. He said it very plainly. He was telling us, President Trump can't fire me because I'm the CEO of my own corporation that happens to be called the Federal Reserve System. It's not federal. It's not part of the government. It's its own separate private corporation that's been run by private bankers, one of whom is J.P. Morgan Chase. I mean, go read The Creature from Jekyll Island. You'll have your eyes open. And so Jerome Powell can stand there and go, we're not going to lower interest rates. Or actually, I liked your version better. That was funnier. Jerome Powell cannot lower interest rates as much as he wants. But the thing is, here's the kicker. If he doesn't lower interest rates, it's not helping the economy. And President Trump can start going, it's his fault.
Yep.
It's his fault.
I'm trying to get the guy to do it, and he won't do it. What am I going to do?
Work with me. He won't work with me. On the other hand, if Jerome Powell does lower the interest rates, that increases the money supply, and it becomes even more worthless.
So he's hosed either way he goes here.
He is fucked either way.
Mm-hmm. All right.
And that's this is another President Trump brilliant move, because President Trump now has Jerome Powell right in the teeny tiny little box where he wants him. And Jerome Powell's not got, he's actually only got three choices. He can lower the interest rates, and then he looks like President Trump's little lapdog.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because he did what President Trump was asking him to do. Or he can keep interest rates where they are and fuck the economy and screw the American people. Like, I'm running the Fed. Okay, not going to make many brownie points doing that. Or he can retire and ride off into the sunset and go, all right, President Trump, it's your baby. And President Trump, when he was in office the first time, he wanted Judy Shelton to be on the Federal Reserve Board. Well, now he doesn't just want her on the board, he wants her running the Fed. But see, the Federal Reserve has lost its charter because President Trump took it away, because the Federal Reserve is essentially bankrupt. Go and look at their balance sheet. They've got something like trillions of dollars in debt.
Yeah.
And so, and at the end of February, at the end of March 2020, President Trump put the Federal Reserve up under the U.S. Treasury. There was an article that came out, I think it was June of 2020, and I want to say it was, was it the New York Times? It said, meet your new Federal Reserve president, meet your new Federal Reserve chairman, President Trump, Mr. Trump, or something like that. I should have grabbed it and, printed it out forever, but it went through exactly all the steps that President Trump did, putting the Federal Reserve up under the U.S. Treasury. So in my opinion, what President Trump is trying to do is he's just trying to reveal what happened, what he did 5 years ago. Okay. So that people will go, Jerome Powell doesn't really run anything. Jerome Powell, it doesn't matter what he does. In fact, why do we have a Federal Reserve note at all? We should just have a U.S. note that's backed by gold or silver. Because the other thing that President Trump knows is that as soon as the Federal Reserve lowers those interest rates, and that's what produces the inflation. It's not actually production that produces the kind of inflation that's detrimental. It's the printing of money that produces inflation that's detrimental. And President Trump wants a gold-backed currency. So let's just trash the one we've got. Let's put the Federal Reserve totally out of business so that people will never go back and do another central bank, at least within my lifetime. He wants to get rid of it so that it is the U.S. Treasury minting and coining money like they're supposed to, like the Constitution says they're supposed to.
Yep, absolutely. And I want to thank Zippy again, real quick. I get it. Decentralization and load balancing 101.
101.
Now, Zippy asked another question, and I got to, because, I mean, since we're sort of on the subject, I got to ask you about this. Trump has made it abundantly clear on more than one occasion. I would love to drop taxes for people making less than like what's $150 or $175,000 a year. In other words, if you make up to that threshold, you don't pay a thin dime. Now, Zippy asked a question earlier, and I was saving it just for this. Is it possible that tariffs could replace the income tax?
Yes.
Because now, let me play the devil's advocate here for a second.
Okay.
If all we're trying to do is get to a reciprocal trade situation, in other words, you charge us 10%, we charge you 10%. Isn't that going to kind of defeat the whole purpose of like replacing the income tax with a tariff? Because like, how much money can you really bring in off of tariffs? Can it fund the whole government if both countries are got reciprocal tariffs on each other?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
So remember what Doge is doing?
Mm-hmm.
Those guys, the 6 young genius computer hackers that have thousands of people in the government helping them root through everybody's balance sheet and find out where all the money laundering is.
Now, wait a minute. Now, wait just a minute. I could be just as much one of those Doge guys. I know how to unplug a computer and replug it back in. I could be up there with them. That's all I'm saying.
Good. And do you remember about 2 weeks ago on Ted Cruz's podcast, he had Elon Musk, and Elon Musk said, "Oh, hey, by the way, we found 14 magic money computers."
And I had not heard that.
Oh, you didn't hear that? Oh,
no.
Oh, you got to go find that clip and scare the socks off yourself. So Elon Musk tells Ted Cruz and whoever the other guy was sitting there, "Oh yeah, we found 14 magic money computers, and there's some in the DOD, and there's some at the U.S. Treasury, and there's some at the State Department, and there's, and we think these computers have just been printing money for like the last 12 years. How much money? We don't know. Trillions.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh.
So there's Doge and the boys ripping through everybody's balance sheet. And what is President Trump doing? USAID closed. Department of Education closed. He's going to take all 455 agencies that the federal government has created since 1913, and he's going to rip them all to shreds. He's going to take the federal government and he's going to get rid of 90% of it. That's my guess.
Okay.
Now, if President Trump gets rid of 90% of the government, do we need $6 trillion in taxes to run that sucker?
Not necessarily.
No. And once we figure out how many different politicians' pockets got all that USAID, Department of Education, taxpayer money, once we figure out who the bastards are who have been betraying us and being traitors, and send them all down to Gitmo, the spa, and get us some proper servants, then we don't need $6 trillion in income tax to run a government that's shrunk by 90%.
Yeah.
And at that point, what Treasury Secretary Bessent said was, we only need $750 billion a year in tariffs to replace all the taxes that you people making less than $150,000 a year have been paying in. And plus, remember, President Trump has promised to get rid of taxes on overtime and tips and Social Security. Now, when my sister complained to me about what, President Trump giving tax breaks to the wealthy, I said, gosh, I don't know. Remind me, when was the last time a billionaire was working for tips? Or when was the last time a billionaire worked an hourly job for overtime? When was the last time a billionaire actually took Social Security? And she goes, really? And I said, yeah, he's not doing it for the billionaires. In fact, he's going to raise their taxes, and they're already bitching about it.
Yeah, there's a proposal right now that's out there in the wind, but it's loud enough you can hear it. That they're talking about taking the top end tax rate on people above a certain amount up to 35 or 40%.
It
And if
has
that happens, the
right.
crying is going to happen.
So let me bring it back to West Virginia. I just out of curiosity, I ran out onto Google and I said, what is the average wage? What is the average salary, average yearly income of someone living in West Virginia? And it was something like $56,000 was the median. So it's halfway between the top and the bottom. I don't think they know how to do averages anymore. Whatever. $56,000. How many people in West Virginia won't have any tax at all?
Mm-hmm.
None.
Nothing.
What do you think that's going to do to the average West Virginian's life? Holy crap.
Yeah.
Hurry up.
Yeah.
Come
Absolutely.
on. Get moving.
Chop, chop.
And then once Doge gets done, all Doge is doing is revealing all the money laundering that we sort of suspected was there anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And now states are doing it. Mississippi has an Office of MOJ, Mississippi Office of Government Efficiency. And guess what they're finding? It'll shock you. They're finding money laundering.
Yeah.
Wait till West Virginia has a WVOJ. Whoa. I don't know.
Woj.
Woj.
Yes.
Or Ohio has a Woj. Or an Ooj. I don't know. I'm making it up. But this Doge thing is going to filter down to the states and then wait till it gets to the local level. Now, I've got a student right now who has friends, connections
Okay.
to what's going on literally locally in Huntington.
Okay.
And apparently somebody decided they were going to start looking at the books too. And I think if you go back and look at the news, some assistant director somewhere was just fired and the director is off on vacation and they're not sure if he's going to be coming back because it turns out these two guys have been in government for 5 decades and their pockets are plenty lined. Plenty. Lots.
Oh my.
And so this Doge thing is it's already filtering down to the lower levels. Now, how much money laundering do you think really goes on in the state of West Virginia at the state level and the local level? Just,
this is West Virginia. We probably invented the process that the feds are using. Are you kidding me?
Yes.
Sorry, folks. For those of you outside of West Virginia who are happening to be on this live stream, like, oh, I can't believe you'd say that about your state. I gotta be honest. I mean, look, we're the ones that. Let me tell you a story about West Virginia. Back in the 80s, a sheriff down in Mingo County got caught vote fraud. He literally tried to sell his office. I kid you not. He tried to sell the sheriff's office. Feds got him, brought him up to Huntington, right? To FBI's getting ready to take him away. He's sitting in a room with 2 FBI agents. And one of them asked a question that was purely rhetorical. He did not expect this now arrested Mingo County sheriff to answer this question. But the agent said, didn't you know that vote buying and trying to do everything you did was illegal? And with a completely straight face, this Mingo County sheriff said, oh, hell no, I didn't know it was wrong. It's what my daddy, my granddaddy been doing for years. The agents had to pick their jaw up off the floor. So when you say to me, how much money laundering is going on at the local and the city, county, and state level in West Virginia, wouldn't shock me at all to find out anything.
Well,
so yeah.
One of the theories in economics that I studied, I had a good time studying it, was that you can tell when there is bribery and money laundering occurring either in a county or in a state because most of the people are extremely poor. Now, Robert Byrd was senator for I don't know how many decades. He died. He literally died 2 months after I got my job.
Mm-hmm.
And I promised the chair of the department I did not JD Vance him. But he was gone. And the worry was, oh my God, there goes the pork.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
yeah.
I sat there, my mouth dropped open. I was horrified. And everybody kind of looked at me and went, what? Don't they do that in Michigan? Yeah, I bet they do.
Mm-hmm.
I bet they
Just
do because the fraud and the bribery and the money laundering was so prevalent in Detroit that you could buy anybody on the Detroit City Council for $2,000. There was so much corruption that the price of corruption was low.
Mm-hmm.
It's the laws of supply and demand. If there's a lot of corruption, the price of corruption is really low. But the people suffer the most because look at the poverty in the state of West Virginia.
Yep.
Look at the poverty across the river in the southern counties of Ohio. You think there's not corruption there? Of course there is.
Or Eastern Kentucky, same thing.
Same thing in Eastern Kentucky and Western, everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's what these sons of bitches fear the most, is being exposed.
Oh, yeah.
Because we got lots of space at Gitmo. I heard they expanded it again.
Oh, Lord. Oh, the fun.
I mean, if your federal tax dollars being stolen from you doesn't piss you off, wait till we find out how much tax money is being stolen from you at the state level. Oh, and if that doesn't convince you, how about the county level and the city level?
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of people going to jail. Lots. Why do you think President Trump just told El Salvadorian President Bukele, look, you need 5 more CCOT centers. I got lots of people to send you.
It's going to be a veritable Congo line if Trump has his way about it.
Oh, all right. So
one last question, and this is going to be something I think you're going to really enjoy. The old expression is that diamonds are a girl's best friend. No disrespect, Doc. I disagree with that where you're concerned. I think your 2 favorite friends are gold and silver.
I love them.
Yeah, I know. So I got to ask you about this. Now, stop me where I'm wrong. Under normal circumstances, I've always heard that gold is the hedge against inflation. But I want to run some numbers past you and see if you can explain to me the why. And then I want to tack on one other thing after this to kind of go with it. When Trump assumed office on January 20th, the asking price on the gold futures market was like $27.46, $2,746 for an ounce of gold on the futures market. Today, close of business on the market, April 21st, it is now running $3,446 an ounce on the gold futures market. Silver is up, but not to the level of gold. Not even close. If gold is a hedge against inflation, and right now we are ever so surely reducing inflation, at least according to the past couple of months CPI numbers, why in the world is gold taking the run that it is? And I'll tack another question onto that. The market right now, if you let off a firecracker too loud around the stock market, it drops about 1,000 points. So what's going on with gold, and why all this volatility in the Dow?
Okay. So if you had spent $2,746 on a 1 ounce round of gold on January 20th, that 1 ounce round of gold is still 1 ounce, right?
Right.
But now it's worth almost $3,500.
Mm-hmm.
So when you buy gold, it protects the value of your money.
Okay.
It protects the buying power of your money, right? Because now you can take that 1 ounce round of gold and sell it for $3,446 minus probably some kind of a fee if you went to a pawn shop. So I mean, you could go all the way back to 1971 when gold was $35 an ounce. 35.
Yeah.
You know, Ron Paul was always saying, all I did with my money, any spare money I had, I was buying 1 ounce rounds of gold for $35 an ounce. If you bought 100 1 ounce rounds of gold for $35 an ounce, that's $3,500 back then. Now multiply it by 100 times.
Yeah.
So the buying power of your money is protected when you buy gold or silver. Back in the, my mom and dad, I God bless them. My dad, when silver was $2.50, $2.50 an ounce, my dad took some money, drove over to Texas, and bought as many ounces as he could for $27,000. So it was a large, heavy box. Someone's going to do the math for me. It was a very large, heavy box. And then, God bless him, he dug a tunnel under the house and he hid the box under the house just to make sure that nobody would find it. He had this little map. $2.50. What was the price of silver today? Almost $33 an ounce.
32. It closed at $32.68.
Okay, so $30 higher than what he bought it. How many pounds did you get out of that 27 grand? Somebody calculated for me and you're off, right?
Oh yeah.
Now, okay. My sister found the box after my parents had passed. My sister found, I had to fess up and tell her where the box was. She took the box, heavy poundage, and she sold it for $5.50 an ounce. Now she made $3 an ounce.
Yeah.
But I told her, I said, do not sell this box. She goes, well, silver's never going to go up over $5.
Oh, famous last word.
I said, yes, it is. It's going to go to 40, 50, $100 an ounce. And she goes, oh, what do you know? Well, I got a PhD in economics. Nah, you don't know nothing. I'm going to just sell the box. And she didn't. She took it to a pawn shop. She didn't actually take it to a silver dealer.
Oh, for the love of God. She is still invited to family holiday dinners, right? I mean, please tell me.
She lives in Oregon.
Oh, well, okay. Oregon.
I need 3,000 miles. I really do. I need 3,000 miles because sometimes, and she's a redhead too. So imagine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. So you get the idea. Anyway, gold and silver, when you buy it and it goes up in value, it protects the buying power of your money.
Yeah.
And that's why President Trump wants to take the U.S. note and back it with gold and silver, so that it is really a true money. So you can use it for exchange to buy stuff. It's used as a unit of account. You use it for counting stuff. It's a standard of value. It doesn't lose its value. And you use it to pay your debts. That's a true money. And so that's what President Trump wants. Now, you asked about the volatility in the market.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the market is not run by humans. I don't know if you remember the movie Trading Places. It's one of my favorite Christmas movies.
Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy, Jamie Lee Curtis, Don Amici, fantastic movie.
Yes, I love that movie. It's one of my favorite Christmas movies. Well, there's a scene in towards the end of the movie where Lewis and Billy Ray go onto the floor of the trading pit, and they're gonna buy and sell orange juice futures.
Yep.
Right, because they got the insider trading scoop, right? They got the note, and so you see all these buy sell. It's a great scene in the movie. That's not what it looks like now.
Yeah.
There's no people buying and selling contract futures for anything anywhere on Wall Street. It's all done by machine. Now, these machines are what we call quant machines. They're quantitative machines. They're programmed with computer programs so that if the price of, let's say, gold goes up by 50 cents, that program will either buy or sell a certain number of contracts.
Right.
Or if the price falls, it'll buyers. It's not human controlled. And so you get what that usually does is it generally tends to smooth out the market. Well, what if people have gone in and they're looking at all this turmoil out in the world, the tariff wars, the falling yuan, the depreciating dollar, and they start monkeying around with the programming.
Yeah.
Now,
it wouldn't do much.
Now, let me throw something out at you.
Okay.
Harvard, that glorious 350-year-old monstrosity of communism. Harvard is supposed to have a $53 billion endowment, right? $53 billion.
That is what I have read. Yes, ma'am.
Why are they borrowing money to the tune of $1.5 billion to run their school when they've got a $53 billion endowment?
Yeah, that never quite made sense to me because it seems to me the $53 billion, you ought to be able to live off the interest between that and the tuition and fees you're charging the kids.
That's right. What if some of these big, because I just read that there were like 400 colleges and universities that are not going to pay attention to the no DEI. They're just going to go ahead and violate EEOC whichever way they want. They're going to violate every single, what can you say it, DEI, anti-DEI initiative that President Trump has put forth, which means all of their money and their endowments, all of their money in endowments, it's not in cash. It's not like sitting down at JP Morgan in an account where they can go, okay, I need to withdraw $1,500. No, guess where it is?
The market.
It's in the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
So there's Harvard, 350-year-old bastion of communism, and all of a sudden, Trump has yanked $2 billion here and $6 billion there, and they got to sell something.
Yeah,
they can't sell the kids.
Yeah,
and the chairs and the tables ain't worth nothing.
Yeah.
So what are they going to sell? Hello, broker.
Yeah. Move me 100,000 shares of orange juice.
I need a couple billion. Well, we're probably gonna have to sell some treasuries. Probably gonna have to sell some NVIDIA. Probably gonna have to sell. I don't care what you sell. Just sell it. I need the money. Now you get enough of those asshole colleges and universities that don't want to play along with Trump's anti-DEI stuff. How many colleges and universities endowment funds have to be ransacked before the market starts to do this? And that's just 400 universities. Does that make sense?
It does.
Now, what about companies? Oh, I got a better one for you. What about states like Washington and Oregon?
Their pension funds are tied up in the market.
Where do you think their money is? Their money is sitting in pension funds and retirement funds. Oh, by the way, so is West Virginia.
Yeah. True.
Like I said, it never belonged to me. So I let it go. I was like, you handle it, God. I ain't ever going to see it anyway. So you got all these states, Washington, Oregon, California, Michigan, Illinois, Massachusetts. You got all these states that don't want to play with the anti-DEI stuff. President Trump is yanking their money too. What are they going to live on? How are they going to pay their employees? Hello, broker?
Mm-hmm. Yep. That starts to explain it.
Yeah, starts, it doesn't take very many to start making that market start to rock. And it doesn't matter if the black boxes with the quant programs in there have this, kind of a steady state programming in it. So it only goes up and down a little bit. You call it, Bill Ackman came out on the Saturday after Trump imposed the tariffs. And he said, and Bill Ackman's a big hedge fund manager. And Bill Ackman said, I really think we need like a 90-day pause on this. And by Monday, we had the 90-day pause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But there was something that I forgot. Can I back up to the tariffs and what President Trump was doing with the tariffs and how it's going? Did I explain that enough? The reason
back it up if you need to. Go ahead.
The reason President Trump called April the 2nd Liberation Day is because once he rips the government all apart, and once we get these reciprocal tariffs and we don't need $6 trillion to pay for a government that's not sizable, most of us, 80% of the country aren't going to be paying taxes. And taxes are a debt. The taxes have made us slaves. Yeah. And so what President Trump has done with Liberation Day is he's lifted the yoke of tax slavery, debt slavery off of our shoulders. That's why he called it Liberation Day. So all of these things together, the market rocking and rolling, gold going to, I think I heard Andy Shankman say last week that he thought gold was going to be up to $4,500 before the end of the year.
Whoa.
But if it's sitting at almost 3,500, it only takes 10 more days at $100 a day. And gold's been jumping more than $100.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So we could be at 4,500 by mid-May.
Mm-hmm. Easily.
So all of these things together, you need to have a balance in your life so solid that both feet are on the ground. And a lot of what President Trump is doing is shaking the fence so that people will pick a side. Are you on the American side or are you on the deep state side?
Yeah.
And other than my sister, I don't know any American that's not on the American side. Well, my sister probably will make it over to the side where Americans, are America first, but she needs to have more pain in her life first.
True.
Because she won't listen to me because I'm just a PhD economist.
Yeah, sometimes you just gotta swallow a lot of and this is your sister, so I say this with respect and affection. Sometimes you got to swallow a lot of stupid before you crap it out of your system.
Well, like I said last time I was on, you can't fix stupid. So I just love her from 3,000 miles away.
Amen to that. I'm going to ask you one last question because this is from one of your favorite fans, and it's not necessarily economically related, but it is a question that I think people are nervous about. Does she think that Trump is in danger if he goes to the Pope's funeral in Italy?
Do we know the Pope's funeral is going to be not CGI'd?
I have no idea.
Because I heard a news broadcaster, I think she was on BBC from 2021, who started to announce that the Pope was just announced to be dead. And then she was like, oh, excuse me, pardon me. Now, how long has the Pope really been dead?
That's an interesting question.
Now, did he truly die after J.D. Vance Hom? Is J.D. Vance the angel of death now for anyone we don't like? Or did the Pope die several years ago? Is the funeral actually going to be live, or is it going to be filmed? Film at 11.
Hey.
Documentary miniseries, Pope Francis's funeral. Or is it going to just be CGI'd like much of Biden's inauguration was?
Fair point. Fair point. Here, no one has asked my opinion, but since I'm the host, I kind of get a vote in this thing. Assuming all things being equal, the Pope is truly dead, and there is going to be an actual funeral that will be live. My theory is, even if someone would like to do something nefarious, Giorgia Meloni likes Trump enough. I don't think she's going to let it happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I could be. That's not to say someone might not try and do something stupid, but I don't think the Meloni government of Italy would be complicit. Now, granted, Vatican City is its own nation. I get it. But while Trump's on the ground in Rome, yeah, not between his people and hers, they're not going to let it happen. Go ahead.
Is it going to be the real Trump, or will it be a body double? Because we know they all use body doubles. Hillary's been using body doubles for years. In fact, I just saw something that claimed she was Hillary, and that wasn't Hillary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the answer to Up in Connecticut's question is, I don't know. Is it going to be a real funeral, or is it going to be videotaped? Is it going to be CGI'd? Or I mean, look at how good filming is these days. Digital filming. Is it going to be the real Trump or a body double?
Yeah.
I don't know. Story at 11 Up in Connecticut. Stay tuned.
There you go.
To be announced.
And with that, we're going to bring the train into the station. Doc, as always, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on here. WWG wants us to ask her about the 10 days of darkness in the Catholic religion. Do we want to go down that rabbit hole, or?
Well, I see. I'm not Catholic, but I did watch Shoes of the Fisherman. Okay, with I can't even remember his name, but anyway, when the Pope dies, there is 10 days where it's 10 days of darkness where there's no information that comes out of
Vatican City.
So it's 10 days before they start their conclave. That's my rudimentary, elementary understanding of the whole thing. So we won't expect to see the multicolored Trini type colors coming out of the Vatican smoke pipe, at least for 10 days.
At the very least.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. That's late.
All right. Yeah, I get it. Doc, as always, like I said, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. Thank you for coming on and illuminating our current economic situations so we all better understand what the heck's going on. I have got a WWG1 was gracious enough to post the link where your work can be found, but I will let you do a plug for yourself. If people want to hear more interviews or read more things that you've written, etc., where can they find it on social media, and what can they do to help you out as far as spreading the good word about the truth of all things economic?
Well, I have my website up under my title there. It's linksync.com. So it's lync-sync.com. And on the homepage, up at the top of the page, you'll see Robin's radio interviews. We really should just say Robin's interviews, because I've expanded way beyond radio at this point. But all of the links to all of my podcasts, my radio interviews, anything that I've written, all of the links are there. I'm not really on social media. The last time I actually posted something in LinkedIn, I think it might have been something like 2016. I'm just not on social media. It saves me a lot of headache and heartache and time. So if people want to see what I'm up to, they can go to my website, go look at my Robbins Radio interviews. If they want lectures on microeconomics or macroeconomics or money and banking, they can go to my classroom lectures. If they want to listen to my Atlas Shrugged class lectures, that's on my Freedom Lectures link. So any class that I've taught in the last, I don't know, 15 or 20 years that I really, really liked, I have video broadcasts of those, or video MP4s of those that people can watch as many times as you want. There's no charge. You don't even have to join the website if you don't want to. It's just our little gift, a thank you to the universe for allowing us to be part of this great awakening that has so marvelously entertained me and my husband. And thank you so much for having me back, Brian. I very much appreciate you.
No. We love having you here. I mean, like I say, though this channel is relatively new on social media, I'm always trying to build a network of experts that when something comes up, it's like, okay, we got to get this person on. We got to have a conversation about this. And when it comes to matters economics, I will have you on here in a heartbeat, because it's like, because there's just, I mean, generally speaking, I like to think that I understand what's going on. Then there's some perspective I just don't get or I don't see. And then I need another set of eyes to kind of like, you're not looking at it right. Look at it this way. So yeah, you're welcome back here anytime you want. If you got something, if you've got something burning on the brain and you're like, I got, like, Brian, what are you doing? Give me a day. All right, fine. Come on, let's go.
Okay. Fair deal. I might take you up on that. But, I'll tell you what, hang on to your hats, because the next year and a half is going to be really exciting. Wait until we get to just before the midterms next year.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be fabulous.
I agree. And folks, with that, we're going to go ahead and bring the train into the station. Thank you so much for being here tonight for another session of Chatting on the Porch. I will be back this Wednesday night with the Wednesday Night Newsroom. Tracy Barkley will be back as my co-host. More videos and live things coming out. In the meanwhile, you guys stay safe out there. And remember the words of that great American philosopher, Tom T. Hall, when he said, "It's faster horses, younger lovers, older whiskey, and more money." We'll see you all later. Have a good night.